seatbelt is going to be a bumpy ride.
Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell at before you blow up a plane.
Basha K. Ali!
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what, good thing to say, I dabbled in stand-up or something. I have no disrespect for you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when the ass takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. Oh, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. Yes, we are postpartum and loving life. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, even Twitter, Twitch, Rockfin, Rumble. We're all over the place. Before I bring in our fabulous guest, guys, check out my YouTube channel. If you haven't watched or liked or subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for, really. Are you waiting for me to die and then do it in memoriam? No, that's dark. Do it now and watch my pregnancy stand-up special once in a lifetime unless I get pregnant again. But those jokes they're retired, and you can watch them I guess until next time. But yeah, it's super funny. Check it out. Like, subscribe, all the things. What else? My first headlining show back it's coming up. It's going to be July 20th out here in my neck of the woods in Westchester. It's going to be in Mount Kisco. The venue is called Jazz on Main. It's going to be 2 shows on Saturday, July 20th. I think a 7 o'clock and a 9 o'clock show. Keanu Thompson will be there as well. I don't know if tickets are available yet, but I'm putting it on your radar, guys. I'm very organized, you can tell. Okay. This is a very special day. I have a very special guest today. This is somebody I have known, I can't even do the math on the amount of years. It's 2024 now. Subtract that by 2005. This person I've known almost 20 years. This is insane. And he's back. He's back in my life to promote his new podcast and his fabulous stand-up schedule, and we're going to get into all of it. Welcome to the show, Adam Yenser. Oh my God!
Hey, Chrissie. Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to see you again.
You look exactly the same. You look just like Adam was a fresh-faced boy when we met. We were both, and I talk about this all the time when I talk about my comedy origin story. I talk about interning for Late Night with Conan O'Brien back when he was still in New York before he went to LA and then was screwed over a bunch of times. He was dethroned from his late night spot a couple times. And Adam was an intern with me, and this was back in like 2005.
2005, yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago, but it also feels like yesterday.
Yeah, it makes me feel old when you say it's 20 years. I still think of those Conan days as being like, just a few months ago in a way. It was such a memorable time.
I don't feel old enough to have been doing anything for 20 years. Maybe dressing myself, maybe. But I remember, God, it was a big deal because I was commuting. I don't know what your situation was, but I was commuting into the city from Fairfield University. So I would take the train, it'd be like an hour and a half or whatever it was. And that was the Metro North. And I would walk to 30 Rock. So that was easy. And just 30 Rock was so awe-inspiring. And I just thought the whole world was opening up to me. I was just like, wow, life felt like full of possibility. And now I'm just a grizzled old stand-up comedian. Now
we've all made it. We're on a podcast. So.
And now we're here doing a podcast. And I remember it was the first time I had taken the subway was that podcast. And I remember Jose Arroyo, one of the writers, the biggest thrill would be like when he would hand me a $20 bill and he'd be like, go downstairs, get me this coffee from Starbucks and then get whatever you want. And like, I'd be like, whatever I want. And like Starbucks was kind of like a new thing to me. And I just thought the fanciest coffee I could get was like, I don't know, a vanilla skim latte. No, it was like a sugar-free, something cancer causing that I would get. And
it's funny you say that because that was probably my introduction to Starbucks too. I grew up in Pennsylvania and it was never part of my life. And now I start every single day with Starbucks. I don't know how I lived without it.
I'm a rewards member. I've gotten points and free merch several times over now. Yeah.
But I remember those coffee runs because you felt like you were in the center of the comedy universe there. It was everything funny that was happening, all the best writers, the best improv performers, the guests. And even if you were just running a coffee errand or making copies, it felt like you were in the coolest place in the world.
They felt like important copies that you were making.
Yeah.
And I had just finished. So that was my senior year. I did that. My junior year, I had an internship at Dateline because I really thought I wanted to be a reporter. And then I spent a semester on Dateline making Dateline copies. And I was like, oh, hell no. This is the most boring shit ever. I'd rather do anything else. And
was that before Conan?
That was before.
Oh, okay.
Year. And then I had reached out to, not Sarah Silverman, Allison Silverman. And so I don't know how I got her information as a college junior. And just, I feel like lucked out and got myself that internship because I think most people, the coveted intern spots are during the summer. And that's when all the sons and daughters of the executives get their internship. So I felt so lucky sneaking in there during the school semester because they're kind of limited to whoever is nearby.
They let the riffraff in then, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do also because I had applied during my junior year to like every internship in New York, and I wanted SNL or Letterman or Conan, The Daily Show. But I applied to all of them, like sitcoms. There's not a whole lot in New York, but there was a lot of soap operas. I think I interviewed for one of the soap operas that was in New York.
Young and the Restless?
Yes, I think so. I don't know if I got an offer there or not, but the one that I applied to that junior year that I did hear back from was the Maury Povich Show. So I wound up interning for the Maury Povich Show for that summer semester of my junior year. And then my senior year, I started applying to Conan, Letterman, SNL, all those over again, and got accepted for the spring semester. So I actually took off a semester and delayed graduating for a semester, but it was the best decision ever because I got to work at Conan. Yeah.
I remember, and I don't know if this, I want to get your take on what your experience was like. Of course, it was so exciting. It felt to me like very competitive because even whether I knew how to get a job there or not, it just felt like every day was like, yes, it's fun. You're in this sort of like comedy whirlwind and it's very exciting. And you're seeing like Brian Stack walk around who would do the bit characters and like talking to the writers. But to me, it felt like, oh God, well, you better not. I felt increasingly like it was competitive. And it's like, what am I even doing? What could I possibly, am I going to fuck up a coffee order? Would I got to mess up like setting out dinner? We were not given important tasks, but I think towards the end there, I got so anxious, like, ooh, this feeling of like, are you going to be picked? Because it was like me, you, it was Liz Mealy who had been doing stand-up since she was 16 years old. It was John Bander who had been an improv guy. And it was Ellie Kemper, who was an older intern. And that is where she met Michael Coman, who was a writer at that time. And they ended up getting married.
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny you call her an older intern because she still looks younger now. I feel like she's.
Oh, yeah. She's frozen in time. I don't know.
And that's, it's interesting because that whole Conan era, whether it was all the writers from there have gone on to do amazing things. Like you mentioned, Brian Stack, he's at Colbert now, I think. Allison Silverman helped create the Colbert Report when it first started. Ellie, has had this huge career. Even people that were production assistants, interns at Conan. There's so many interns from Conan that wound up working on The Office. But my experience there, it was very competitive. I wound up becoming the intern coordinator then after my internship was over. But I did what they called the Jason Chalemi intern until you're hired strategy.
Yes.
So I got an internship that spring semester where I was full-time. And then because I delayed graduating for a semester, I said, do you guys need interns over the summer? So I stayed on 3 days a week, and I would commute. You mentioned your train commute. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. So I would take a bus from Allentown, Pennsylvania to New York. It was 2 hours every morning and 2 hours every night. And I'd go back and forth like that. And then when the fall semester started, it was my senior final year. I was graduating in December, and I didn't have classes on Friday. So I asked if I could keep interning at Conan 1 day a week on Fridays. And I would drive myself after my class on Thursday at Penn State in central Pennsylvania. I'd drive an hour back to Allentown, sleep there, take a bus 2 hours in the morning to New York just to intern on Friday, and then commute back to Penn State over the weekend. But eventually it paid off. Yeah. But I just remember starting at Conan because that was the show that our generation kind of grew up loving. Like that was the coolest, funniest late night show there was.
He was and is still the best.
He is, yeah.
Yeah. And
but I remember the first
kind of on our level more so than like Leno or like Letterman. They seemed like more like adults, whereas Conan seemed like a buddy. I don't know why I felt that.
And I think he's kept that up really well too with his travel show and now his podcast. He's stayed funny and relevant to where there's still people in their 20s now discovering him and loving him. But I remember the day that I started at Conan, me and this other intern from Penn State that were there at the same time, Josh Sorokach, we were walking down
what happened to Josh?
He was writing for, I think it's a cider website for a little while.
Okay.
And then I think he's still in New York. I haven't talked to him in a few years, but we kept in touch over social media and stuff for a while, but I think he's doing well. But I remember there was that Studio 6A hallway where all the props department and music and the studio entrance was. And on our first day, we're walking past the props department and they had the cactus chef playing We Didn't Start the Fire on the flute. And it's just a prop of a cactus. And we were like starstruck by it. It's just a prop. And we're like, that's the cactus chef on TV.
There were so many funny moments. Like I remember this girl, Melanie. I don't remember her last name.
There was two Melanies. Yeah. There was Melanie.
Was a little bit bigger. She cracked me up because she was.
I was gonna say which Melanie is which, but now that you said one of them was bigger, I'm not gonna
physically.
I know.
Her spirit was bigger.
Okay.
She was what's his name? Max Weinberg. She was Max Weinberg's. I think. No, because we had an inside joke, me and her, because Max Weinberg had I remember he had his own intern. He had an intern all to himself. And he would we observed him to sort of treat them like in kind of like a slave-like manner. And we would joke, me and Melanie, be like, oh, Max needs to be carried to the bathroom. And I forget the name of his intern. I think it might have been like this little Asian girl.
Yuri.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Is Yuri Asian? My memories are so
bad.
Yep. Wow, that's the shit I can remember, but not like what I did yesterday. And we were just like, Yuri, Max needs to be carried to the bathroom. Like Max needs to be spoon fed his lunch. Oh my god, we crack each other up so much. But it was this, you felt very starstruck, and I remember when Slipknot came, and I remember this so vividly. They're like, well, we need to cover the drummer's seat in plastic. Like the PA at the time, I forget his name. His job was to cover the seat in plastic, the drummer's seat, because he was known to pee during performances. And
wow,
they were
I don't remember that.
They were that. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
That was the drummer from Slipknot?
Apparently, yeah.
Really?
They're like, oh, he's known to pee during performances.
Because then you know the story then about who became the drummer for Slipknot after that, right?
No.
So Max's son, Jay, who was like 11 or 12, I think at the time, maybe a little bit older than that when we started. But he was a huge Slipknot fan, and his dad would bring him in when Slipknot was on the show, and he'd watch them rehearse, and he became a drummer himself. And then when their old drummer left, Jay Weinberg became the drummer for Slipknot and was their touring drummer for several years. I think he just left the band. I think they parted ways like last year. But Jay Weinberg was the drummer for Slipknot for several years.
Nepotism in action. Unbelievable. That's so crazy. Yeah, I remember walking around. Like, it was just such a thrill to be in the building, like just looking at the makeup room and looking at the props and almost just
every time Slipknot was on, it was fun because they would do the Slip Nuts, where it was Brian Stack, John Glazer, and who else was it? There was
Oh wow, yeah,
the
John
three of them,
Glazer.
and they'd come out and they'd throw the nuts around. Oh, and Andy Blitz, and they
Oh
would come out
God, wow,
and
yeah.
they'd throw the nuts around, and Slipknot let them open for them at one of their concerts, and they showed this tape roll of the
No
audience booing
way.
them and throwing stuff at. Oh, it's so funny, yeah.
That is so funny. You're like saying names that I haven't like because there are so many I haven't like thought of in a while. But it's like, oh yeah, Andy Blitz. I thought they were all like so cool. Everybody who worked there, but they also seemed kind of like aloof, like they were too good. And you know what? They should be. They are too good for the interns. You know, I don't know what I
I
expected.
didn't get that vibe from people there, especially someone like, I mean, you mentioned Brian Stack. Brian Stack was one of the nicest people I've ever met in comedy and working in television. He would remember all the interns' names from day one. And he was
Yeah,
the type of person where, because he was good to the interns, so we all loved him. We were all like, if we ever make it, I'm good. I was always like, I'm going to be like Brian Stack. I'm going to remember everybody's name. And then when I got into the industry, I'm just one of those people that forgets everybody. I didn't live up to the Stack standard at all.
he was so nice, and I remember Jose was so nice. He gave me a book about comedy writing that I still have somewhere, and like that, those things that means a lot to you, those moments. And I remember like asking them for advice, and I think it was Brian Stack who was like, just get into improv, like just go do improv. And then I did
Uh-huh.
UCB as soon as I graduated, did 5 years between the UCB and the Magnet Theater. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah,
right, Magnet. I haven't heard that place in years. I used to go there to see friends' shows all the time when I was in New York.
yeah, that was God. Who was the name? The guy that was in charge of the Magnet Theater. He was kind of like a large. He was like a tall, sort of like lurching man. What the hell is his name? Um, somebody in the chat might know. No, it's very niche. I don't expect you guys to know. He had like an interesting name,
Uh-huh.
like not Homer, but something.
I don't remember who it was that was in charge. I might know the name if you said it though.
But I wonder if like that because UCB kind of tanked during the pandemic. I think they went bankrupt. I wonder if
They
Magnet.
still do classes. They have a theater out here still. That's where I started taking sketch writing classes when I was in New York. It was after it was, I don't remember if I started while I was interning at Conan or after I started as the like receptionist and intern coordinator, but I took 2 levels of sketch
Armando,
writing.
Armando Diaz.
Diaz, yeah, that's right.
Armando Diaz and Ed Herbsman and Shannon Manning founded it. And I saw Ed Herbsman in God, I think in a movie recently. I think he played like a bodega worker in this I think it's the movie's called If, which stands for Imaginary Friend. It's with
Oh yeah, that's a new one that's out with Ryan Reynolds,
Ryan
right?
Reynolds. Yeah.
It's funny how you say you see him in the background of movies, because I think when I first got into entertainment, and especially when I moved to LA and started living in Hollywood, you think you're going to wind up schmoozing with all these celebrities and being friends with famous people, and instead you just know every improv actor in every commercial that comes on TV.
Oh,
Every commercial.
still.
I'm always like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so and so.
Even still, like I've been with my husband like almost 10 years. Like I go, if we see a commercial and I go, I know him, he goes, improv, right? I go,
Yep.
yep. Yeah, you're just, oh man. And I tried and failed. I remember for a couple years, all I did was try out for commercials, and like I don't think I got a single one. I think one that I was actually happy I didn't get was like a commercial for like herpes medication. And I was like, well, if I get this, what are people gonna think? You know, but
You could be the face of herpes.
you do everything. You like you just try out for everything because you're like, I guess this is showbiz, right? And I had so much failure in like the kind of commercial acting world, and even trying to be a background actor, that I did a one woman show, and then I was like, I was so afraid of stand up for so many years, but finally after doing that one woman show, I was like, you know what, I could try it. I might as well. And then yeah, I've been doing stand up ever since, but I remember being so afraid of it for some reason.
Now, did you, the first time you tried it, my experience was I always thought stand-up was something that I kind of wanted to try, but I was a little nervous about it for a long time. I wrote jokes in a notebook for 3 years before I ever got the nerve to get on stage and actually try it. And then I actually
Wow.
did the midnight open mic on when was it? It was like midnight or 1 a.m. at the UCB theater on Saturday nights. They would have an open mic. And Pete Holmes was the host back then of the open mic.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time I ever did stand up. And my first set went okay. I wouldn't say I killed, but I didn't bomb. But getting those laughs, it was like as soon as I got off stage, it was like, oh, this is what I love doing. There was this instant sense of, oh, this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah, because there's people who do it for ego. I mean, I would be lying if I say I didn't do stand up for ego reasons at all, but it's not entirely for ego. It's like you feel really connected. You feel like a bond with the audience when you're able to make them laugh. It's like you feel kind of like everybody is in that one moment, like we're kind of all on the same page. And then the more of those moments you get, you feel like, yes, it's great to be able to make people laugh, but it's like a nice sort of togetherness feeling. Wow.
And yeah, and I like the control freak aspect of it also, where you're like, it's your perspective, it's your joke. The reaction is immediate, whether it works or it doesn't. I just love that feeling of being in the moment. Because even as a writer, and I've never done improv, but with improv, you're relying on other people. With writing, no matter what sketch or bit you write, when it comes out, I'm often proud of what I did. But if there's like one thing that somebody delivered differently than I would have, or one thing that they cut out or changed, it feels like, oh, I would have done it slightly different. But stand up I love that feeling of just, it's all you and you're in control of everything.
I like watching your career, Adam, because you're like, I feel like you very much took this kind of like what I think you had a lot of mainstream success. Like you started working for Conan right away, and like good for you. Like you deserved it, doing all those 2-hour, like 4-hour round trip commutes. Like you deserve. You just what did you say? You were like, literally, I'll take anything. Like just please let me work here.
When I started at Conan, you mean?
Yeah.
When I got hired? Yeah, I was kind of waiting for anything to open up. And when we first started interning, Aaron Cohen was the intern coordinator. And then he went on to work at Colbert. I think he might still be working with Colbert. And then the intern coordinator after that was Carrie Aldridge. And then she left and took a job at HBO. And I had kind of filled in for her at the intern coordinator desk when she was away a few times. And so then the producers called me up and said, do you want to be the intern coordinator, which is kind of where a lot of interns who wound up getting hired there, that was one of the spots, because you're kind of a receptionist for the office and you do the hiring and supervising of the other interns. And then I did that job for about 6 months and then became the segment producer's assistant. And then that's the job I did there for the rest of the 6 years that I was there.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then did you move out to LA with them?
Yeah, I never saw myself moving to LA. And even when I moved out with the show, I thought I'll go do that for a few years and then I'll probably move back to New York. Because once you're there, you're talking about that excitement of being in Rockefeller Center. It's like I wanted to see myself as a New Yorker. I like the energy of the city. You feel like you're in the center of the world.
Like
and I thought,
you're with it. Yeah.
And what I also found interesting, I had never spent much time in LA. I had been there for a day once before I moved out there. And people in New York, I don't know if it's still this way, but I feel like a lot of them talk shit on LA.
Yes,
like,
constantly. Oh,
and then
we don't respect LA.
Yeah. And then when I got out here, people in LA don't shit on New York, and LA is not bad at all. I was like, oh, it's nice. It kind of got in my blood. But yeah, I moved out here in 2009 when Conan's whole show moved out for the Tonight Show. And we all thought it's the Tonight Show, will be there forever. And then the whole late night war thing with Leno happened about 10 months later. And then I was off after the show after the Tonight Show went back to Leno. There was about 10 months in between that show ending and then his TBS show starting, where I was just kind of doing stand-up in LA, applying to other random jobs. I auditioned for Last Comic Standing, I think, during that time. And then when his show came back on TBS, they brought me back on board. And then I worked for the TBS show for about a year. And then the writing job opened at Ellen that I applied for and wound up moving to Ellen.
And then you worked for Ellen. Oh my God. What was that? Like, I've heard so many rumors.
Yeah.
Like, she's a bitch. She drinks baby blood. She's horrible.
And end of interview. Good talking. No. So I liked working there. I was there for 10 years altogether. It was a tough place to work. She could be tough at times. There was a producer that was could be difficult, but I kind of thrived in that environment. And I loved the other writers. I had a really good, fellow writing staff that I was working with there. It was a tough place to work. But I wouldn't have stayed there 10 years if it was terrible,
You were there for 10 years.
I was, yeah.
Holy crap! So what roles did you do in that time?
So I was a staff writer. What was really fun about Ellen is a lot of the late night shows divide between monologue writers and sketch writers. So you're kind of primarily assigned to one or the other. At Ellen, you just get your assignments for the week. Sometimes you'd be on like a sketch or a remote bit with a guest, and then sometimes you'd be writing a monologue. So I really liked that I got to write both. And then there was a few bits. There were some of my favorite bits that I developed for Ellen. There was one called Ellen's on Your Facebook, where we'd have the audience's email addresses from when they register for tickets, and we would go through their Facebook pages and find embarrassing pictures, and then Ellen would show the picture and ask them, about their why they posted it, because there was a lot of stories in the news at the time about people getting fired from their jobs or in trouble for work for pictures they had posted on Facebook. So we were thinking, oh, we wonder if we can do this to the audience. That became kind of a recurring segment. And then there was a hidden camera bit I did called Kevin the Cashier, played by Adam, where I'd work at different stores and kind of prank the customers. And that was something I was never like a huge hidden camera comedy fan myself. I thought it was funny, but it wasn't something I was into. And so our head writer, Kevin Lehman, came up with this idea for me to go out. And I think the first one I did was at a Walgreens. It wound up being really fun, and Ellen liked it. So we did a lot of those. I worked at all different places. I did one at a Sleep Number mattress store. I did one there's a fancy restaurant in LA called Cut, where I did one. We did some at PetSmart. And then one of my favorite bits I would do, I'd play this like fake investigative reporter, because Ellen would always do the big giveaway shows at the holidays where she gives away prizes to her audience. And then we found there was people who would take all the prizes they got from Ellen and then go on Craigslist or eBay and try to sell them.
No, the disrespect. Wow.
And so we set up this thing where it was like a sting operation. And I originally pitched, I think, one of our correspondent kind of comedians that we could send out for it. But the head writer, he goes, why don't you do it yourself? And I was like, I'd love to do it. So I went out in a suit with a microphone, and we had the big reindeer mascot from Ellen's 12 Days of Giveaways. And we would email these people anonymously saying we wanted to buy their stuff. And then we'd show up with a camera crew and kind of bust them for selling Ellen's prizes on
Did
Craigslist.
any of them feel embarrassed?
Some of them did. Yeah, we'd always try to do it in a way where they were kind of in on the joke and having fun with it. There were some that felt embarrassed, and we would, we'd cut if they were upset or didn't want to be on camera. But it was fun because the comments from the audience watching it when we'd air those bits, we would kind of do it just as a tongue-in-cheek way but some of the audience members would get really mad. They're like, oh, I can't believe this person is doing this to Ellen.
Wow. Did you get like pretty close to her? Did you do you ever go to her house? Like, did she invite people over? Did she know everybody's names?
She knew the writers' names. And I went to her house a couple times, to her houses. There's many of them. They're just, I got pretty close to her working with her, and I don't stay in real good touch with her, but we talk every now and then over text. And I've been, I left on good terms. It was, I wouldn't say I was like close friends with her, but you work with her every day. She get to know us well. And, I would go to her house mainly when we were working on side projects, like when she hosted the Oscars or when she was working, on other media appearances and stuff like that.
That's cool. Wasn't she dating like Portia for a time? Did you hang out with her?
She's still dating Portia for a time.
Oh,
they've been together for a long time. Yeah.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah. Portia was great too. Portia would be around the office a lot.
That's neat. Okay. So how did you go from Ellen to Babylon Bee?
I left Ellen the year before her show ended. So I left in like 2021. And I had always been very openly conservative. Like there's not many in Hollywood, but I remember I was in the control room at Ellen when the whole Brett Kavanaugh hearings were happening.
Oh my God.
And
wow.
They had what was her name? Christine Blasey Ford up there testifying. Yeah. And then Kavanaugh said, I forget, it was something where he retorted something very, very forcefully against them. And I started clapping in the control room, and I go, oh, we're not all going to clap for that. So I never hid the fact that I was conservative. And I was a fan of the Babylon Bee because I'd seen a lot of their, satire articles and stuff like that. And one of their writers and hosts at the time, Ethan Nicole, had heard about me through some mutual comedian friends and brought me on the Babylon Bee podcast as a guest first. And then a few months later, after I left Ellen, he asked me if I wanted to come on board and kind of collaborate freelance for a little while. And then it became a full-time gig for a while. And then I got laid off in November. So
I can't imagine like the fact that you're conservative working in Hollywood and you feel like you don't have to hide it. That is what I've always felt like would have made me kind of now very incompatible with working in like any kind of mainstream or in Hollywood at all. I mean, not that I would want to, but I was very much like when we were interns, I was super liberal. I was just a default liberal feminist, like just you go to college, that's what your programming is, I guess. And because my parents didn't have that much of an impact on me, like as far as their politics and their beliefs go. So that's interesting to hear that you didn't feel like you had to pretend that you were liberal or just never chime in.
I think it was I think because I had never hid it, even when I started at Conan, politics didn't come up often because it's a very apolitical show. But I never really hid the fact that I was more conservative. And I think stand-up really helped me navigate that well, because when I started doing stand-up, it was 2007, I think. And then like Obama won the next year. And I was out there doing stand-up jokes because I grew up looking up to a lot of left-leaning comedians like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. And I didn't do all political material. I did a lot of just observational stuff and apolitical stuff. But I kind of got that sense from these comedians that I liked on the left that you're supposed to go after politics. You're supposed to kind of criticize this stuff. So when I would do stand-up when I was first starting out, I had anti-Obama jokes because I was more at that time. It was when he ran against McCain the first time, and I would just do these jokes. And then I realized after very quickly that I was one of the only comedians out there that was doing comedy from that perspective. And then by the time I got to where I was working as a writer in Hollywood, what stand-up helped me do, because you're in that, like I was saying, it's you and the audience, and there's this immediate reaction. You have to kind of find a way to talk about it in a way that you're not going to necessarily alienate and piss off everyone to the point where they're going to leave or dislike you. And I really had fun writing and kind of walking that line of how can I write jokes that express my point of view, but are funny enough or strong enough that they're going to make people laugh, even if they disagree. And so when I came into Hollywood, I never hid that I was conservative. And I think that's important for more conservatives that are out there if they're working in the entertainment industry, because I think part of the pressure from the left is they want us to be ashamed to say this stuff. They want us to, I would hear from, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but both, at Conan and at Ellen, every now and then somebody would come up and be like, I agree with you. I don't want to say anything out loud, but that's, I'm secretly on your side of this one. And so I think it is important for conservatives to be more outspoken, but I think you do have to be smart about it. Whereas a lot of people, especially who make it in conservative media, they're trolls or they're provocateurs, and they try to be as antagonistic as possible. And I think that really works for drumming up attention. If you're trying to build a social media following, if you're trying to build your own brand. But I enjoyed talking to people on the other side, and I wanted to get into these mainstream comedy shows, and it's kind of unavoidable to wind up working around a lot of people on the left in those environments.
You said you kind of looked up to Stephen Colbert, and I remember seeing him on the Daily Show being like, oh, this is like kind of an interesting character. And then I would watch him on get his own late night show. And then especially through the pandemic, I was very turned off by just like what a corporate shill he's become, especially for Big Pharma, especially during the pandemic. And I wonder,
you weren't a fan of dancing vaccines? You didn't think that was the funniest comedy segment you've ever seen?
Did you have a similar feeling like, God, these comedians I idolize have changed or are? just are kind of paid for?
Yeah, I did to some degree. There are still there's comedians on the left that I still love and think are funny. But I think what disappointed me with Colbert, it's still kind of weird to watch his show because he's such a funny person. When you look at Strangers with Candy, when you look at The Daily Show, when you look at the Colbert Report, he was doing a conservative character, but it was funny in this way that, whether he was making fun of your side or not, it was hilarious. It was such a smart show. And I was excited when he took over The Late Show. I thought he would be great for that spot. And, partly because of, the Trump derangement syndrome and partly because of the pandemic, it became this very preachy, morose, one-sided, like political diatribes. And it seemed like it lost some of that humor that made everybody love him. And I know there's so many talented people that work on that show also. There's a lot of funny writers and comedians that are involved with it. And it just seems something with his tone changed. And, it was disappointing to see that with him and a lot of other comedians where they started to put the politics first. It felt like, one of the things that I think made Jon Stewart's Daily Show what it was is he was just a brilliant comedian. And that show was not, designed at first to be an overtly political show. When Craig Kilborn first hosted it, it wasn't heavy-handed politically. And I think over time, as our culture became more politically charged, they kind of put the politics more and more forward. And when you have shows, now like The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, it seems their audience wants that. So I get they have their audience that likes it, but it does alienate half the country. And then, I think there's sort of there's an inverse of that on the right too, I think, where a lot of right-wing media will criticize shows like Colbert or SNL for going too hard left on the politics. But then I don't know that I see much from the right that's not the inverse of that. They'll criticize going for clapter and they'll criticize being biased and doing stuff that alienates one half. But, I don't see many people that don't already agree with, say, Daily Wire going to check out Daily Wire comedies. They're not necessarily doing the sort of broad comedy that everybody used to come to get. Like everybody used to watch Johnny Carson. Everybody used to watch Conan. And it was because they weren't super heavy-handed politically.
They were good at being neutral, and they had great personalities that even if they did show their hand, like to where they were politically slightly, the audience would forgive them because they're just such lovable personalities. Yeah. Whereas like Colbert is not a lovable personality in his role as late night host. He's very unlikable, I think. And that's a good point that you're making. Like, why don't sort of right-wing outlets make it more politically neutral? I think the right wing will always feel like, well, we don't have the leg up because we are not. The establishment media is always going to be left wing. Like Hollywood is left wing. The late night shows are going to be inherently left leaning, and I think the right people on the right still feel like they're the underdogs in the sort of media landscape. We've got to kind of make our own way. And if you look at Daily Wire is our only example of like folks on the right making they're barely making comedy content. I think they're just in their infancy in terms of bringing people on, or just I'm not sure what their inner workings are like, but I think they've made one, maybe two comedy movies, and it's not their main bag. I feel like news and interviews are their main focus. That it doesn't seem like to me like they're really trying to be a comedy powerhouse, which I would love to see somebody and do that.
Yeah, and I think there are some people in right-wing media that I think are really funny. Like I like Dave Landau a lot. He's over at Blaze right now.
Dave's great.
And I think one of the great things about Dave is he's somebody who comes from a comedy background. He's an accomplished stand-up comedian. He kind of has that experience and that sensibility. I think a lot of what happens on the right is there is this right-wing media distaste for mainstream left-leaning politics or comedy rather. But then, what I love about Dave, like I said, he has this comedy background. A lot of the people that they kind of try to put forward are either political pundits or right-wing
Yeah.
media figures that then try to be funny.
Ugh.
And there's this
Ugh.
immediate sense. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you can
And
tell
then,
someone like me or you who's done stand-up. I mean, you started stand-up even before me. I started in 2010, 2011. And that's what I kind of found a little bit, I rolled my eyes with the Daily Wire. I'm like, they're just having their people that work there that are news people, that are like politics people. It's just kind of like, I feel like forcing them into a comedy role. Like, yes, I love that they brought on Tyler Fisher and maybe a couple others that are genuine comedians, but I was like, oh my God, news people trying to be funny. Like, I'm cringing. So that's what I said at the time. I wish they would bring on more people who have more of a solid background in comedy and comedy writing rather than like, I think I'm funny and I'm in charge of this whole thing anyway. Why don't I just put myself in? And I was like, ugh.
And this is the whole, this is the whole industry also, but it's especially in right-wing media. They're also very social media obsessed because that's where a lot of their platforms and their fan base comes from. And so, when you have, like if you look at SNL or The Daily Show or Conan back in the day, they're going out to improv theaters looking for talent. They're going to the Ivy Leagues for the best comedy writers that are out there working for, the Lampoon.
Why do you think the Ivy Leagues have the best comedy writers? Because that is my criticism of SNL, that it's too much incestuous, like fishing in the same small pool.
So I don't know if I would still say the Ivy Leagues have the best comedy writers because the Ivy Leagues are in their own political disaster right now. I feel like
it's a woke dumpster fire.
Yeah. But I think back in the day, it takes a certain amount of intelligence to write good comedy. Even if you're writing about stupid things, even if you're writing dumb characters, there's an intelligence that it takes. And I know a lot of both stand-up comedians and comedy writers, it's very common for them to have a background in things like law or philosophy, because they're these things that kind of teach you to think, like make illogical arguments or sort of, see the logical flaws in life. And kind of draw attention to that absurdity. Yeah.
I've always had an interest in like psychology, like why people do the things they do, and like almost kind of like arguing for the other side. That's where a lot of comedy is.
Yeah. And that was one of the funny basis of the Colbert Report when he was kind of doing that character and he was making these funny illogical arguments from the right, even though he wasn't on the right. But yeah, I think that's there is an intelligence, I think, that you need for a lot of comedy writing. And I think that's why, at least at one time, the Ivy Leagues were, one of the best places to look for that stuff. And then what I was going to say, though, about conservative comedy, bring back to that, when they're looking for political pundits or people who already have a big social media following, there are people who are big that then try to be funny. Whereas I think, they need to look at, if you actually go out to comedy clubs and see who's the funniest person here. Because I think you will find, when I go out to comedy clubs, there certainly aren't a lot of conservative comics, but there's more than what you might expect. And there are some, I think, that are very funny. And there's some that are kind of more moderate. They might not be on the right, but there's a big pushback now against things, like cancel culture and woke culture, or even people that maybe didn't traditionally identify as being on the right. When you go out to actual comedy clubs and open mics, you do hear those kind of perspectives at least more frequently than you did 5 to 10 years ago. And, I would like to see them kind of develop, content and personalities from the comedy world, rather than looking who's the current biggest right-wing media star, and let's try to make them be funny. Because, I think that's one of the problems. I think a lot of the right-wing media sites, they're run by people who don't really have a background in comedy. They want to be funny, but they don't have a background in it.
But similar to the same reason why you have comedy club owners going to the latest or like management companies going to the latest like big TikTok star, I mean, like, ooh, you have this huge audience.
Yeah.
Can you just figure out, hey, Pinky Patel, can you just figure out an act, something to do on stage for an hour? We can sell tickets. We know we'll sell out a whole weekend. And that'll be that. Same thing with, like, I remember when Jeremy Piven was coming up, I did a show with him at the Off the Hook Club in Naples, Florida. They had his name as a headliner on the marquee. He did, I think, 18 to 20 minutes. I was one of maybe 4 openers for him that night. And I remember people were walking out, leaving like, when is he going to come on? Like, this show is not what it was advertised as. I remember like the owner at the time was like blaming me, like I was too dirty and that's why people were walking out. I'm like, no, because they probably expected Piven to be on half hour ago. But again, he could sell tickets. He had the built-in audience, and that's why, and I understand the perspective of the comedy club owner. That's like, hey, they have to keep the lights on. They have to, and it takes longer. Like, of course, the right thing to do is to go into the clubs and recruit and scout who is funniest and build from there. But a lot of times the funny people don't always have the biggest audience and aren't going to sell the tickets, which is a shame. But that's how it used to be, kind of in like the golden era of stand-up, like 80s and 90s. You just needed to be funny and you needed a scout to see you, and then that would be that. You'd have a whole career. You'd get a late night spot, you'd get a sitcom, and then you'd get a traveling tour set up for you. And now you got to do all of that yourself.
Yeah. And I think it is a shame in a way, because I've always struggled with social media because I'm not the most social media savvy or active person. And I think a strong argument can be made. It's always helped comedians or any artist to have a knack for branding and self-promotion and marketing yourself. That's always been a part of it. But on social media, where it's just one person and you're the producer, you're the promoter, you're the artist, it's tilted the scales, I think, in favor of some people who are it's like the primary skill they have is marketing and branding and self-promotion. Like, I think it's in one of the 48 laws of power. There's one that's court attention at all costs. And I think there are people on social media who they're good at drawing attention to themselves.
Like Alex Stein, Leonardo Joni has been good at that lately.
Exactly, like Alex Stein. Speaking of conservative personalities that shouldn't do comedy.
Oh my God. Let me get my sound effect out. Oh my God. I should have my drops ready. Oh.
But he's another one. I think it's to that point where he's an internet troll who's drawn a lot of attention to himself. He did those viral videos where he goes to these town hall meetings, and those went viral. And those bits, I think, are good in themselves. I get why people, but if you look at his, I'm not a fan of his stand-up. I don't understand his appeal as a comedy person. He's like Steven Crowder. He's like Steven Crowder 2.0. It's that
he has gotten a lot stronger with his stand-up. Like I have had him on a bunch of my shows, and even like Lila Hart opens for him frequently.
I like Lila. Yeah, I've done shows with her in Dallas before.
He has gotten stronger, but like, yeah, I feel like with Alex, he has this constant pressure on him. Like, what is going to be his next big viral moment? How is he going to, because that is what keeps his show going. That's what keeps his paycheck coming. That's what keeps the lights on for him. That's how he first found success, was from these huge viral moments rather than like
being good at comedy.
Yeah, I mean, for him, that's probably most. I'm not saying he's not good at comedy, but it's kind of like, it's, you know what I mean? Like a bear in the zoo. They got to figure out what button to push that's going to give them the biscuit. And for him, Alex learned how to get his biscuit, and it was from the viral moment. So I feel like he's kind of trained to do that. Like, that's success for him.
Yeah. And I would agree. That's definitely a big part of it. That is the root of it. And that's the thing, is now it's these moments that go viral, that draw attention to, like I said, to one person. And I think that's different from when you look at the traditional late night shows where they have a team of writers that have this writing or stand-up experience. And they're kind of, like a show like a Conan or an SNL, even in their heyday, they have, 15 to 20 writers that are at the top of their league trying to churn out this much material. And yeah, when you're just looking for one personality on social media, a lot of it does depend on those viral moments. And that's where it comes back to, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that people are trying to get just these moments that go viral, because I don't know that they're the best written comedy or the best performed comedy. They're just things that get attention. I think it does incentivize sort of trolling and being a provocateur and generating outrage rather than maybe making the best content.
Yeah, and I've known, God, incredible. Like, I know Nick DiPaolo and Joe DeVito are two. They're touring stand-up comics, but they also write for Gutfeld. And I'm friends with Joe DeVito, and I've talked with him like several times. Like, and it's this, I guess, this feeling that maybe a lot of writers have, like, and I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but that you maybe burn through some of your best or some good material on the show and you can't use it for yourself or use it in your stand-up. Or that you feel
Yeah.
limited.
I've done Gutfeld a few times. I try to write to the topics that day, but there are times when a story comes up and you're like, oh, I could use this bit that I have about that and kind of, regurgitate it on there. And it is hard not to burn through material. And I think that's one of the things that's hard with comedians nowadays and posting your content online, because you have to build this social media following. And now, not just for, like TV jobs or media platform jobs, but even to get booked at clubs, they look at your social media following. And it's led to this rise in the like crowd work clips, which is always weird to me, because when I was growing up, I think crowd work is fun to see in a club. I think there's comics that are great at it, but it was never what attracted me to stand up. When I was watching, Comedy Central Presents specials in the 90s, or when you first looked up, clips of your favorite comedians on YouTube or online, it was their best written material. And now I think a lot of comedians, they're generating these moments of this crowd work stuff because it is a way to put out content constantly without burning through everything that you've written and putting it out there. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm surprised that people want to watch things like crowd work clips online so much. I think it's fun to see it live. I don't understand the appeal of watching it.
I think people like to see a roast. People like, is that, the type of person that's like, oh,
Yeah.
roast my buddy, make fun of my friend, say he's fucking gay. There's something in us as humans, like we kind of like to see other people being directly roasted, and it's this feeling of like, oh, she was drunk, she spoke out of turn, or like she heckled, now like what's gonna happen? Because I've had a couple of like viral crowd moments that have given me some like good attention for like several months, and it's a really satisfying feeling to know, like, wow, this moment that wasn't planned, and it feels like you're riding a wave. It literally feels like you're paddling out. You see this wave coming, you're like, all right, I could crash and burn. But that moment, it's like, if it goes well, you're like, wow, I'm riding it in all the way to the shore. This feels great. You're truly put on your feet. It's like that. It's like it's literally just a test of your wits, and not like, okay, no preparation could have prepared me for this. No well-written joke could have prepared me for this moment. It's just me against this heckler. There's something really exciting about that. But I know what you're saying. They have become popular as ways just to not burn through your material. And you look at someone like Matt Rife, who made his whole career, like, blew the fuck up just over his crowd work.
And I think there's something to be said definitely for those ones where something, uniquely, what would you like you said, like a roast, or if someone gets outraged or some joke lands perfectly where you have this interaction that works out. What I mean is, I don't like these where it's just 50 videos of different comedians asking a couple in the audience how long they've been together. Which is
okay. You see too many ones that are boring.
Yeah. Well, that are very generic crowd work, that are very almost formulaic. Yeah.
Yeah, it is easy to default to the easy questions, like, what do you do for work? How long have you been together? Because you even start to write jokes based on that. And sometimes you have crowd.
Because how long have you been together? It's always the same thing. If they say a short amount of time, they go, oh, you guys are probably still sleeping together. You probably still like each other. And then if they say a long amount of time, you go, oh, when's the last time you had sex? You guys probably don't even like each other anymore. It's just some angle of those two stock responses. And I just see a lot of people kind of do that same thing over and over again.
It's easy to be jaded as a comedian and be like, because like those are the kind of stock responses. But audience members, they're not, especially people that aren't really fans of comedy. Like, they might get out to one live comedy show like a couple times a year. So for them, that's like, oh yeah, how did they know? Like they completely nailed us. We've been together 10 years. Wow, like that's So it's probably like every other profession. Like, dentists watch other dentists work and they're like, oh really, you're gonna fill the cavity with that again? You don't know about this new stuff? Okay,
he's doing a hacky filling.
Yeah. Really, that's how you're gonna pull the tooth? Okay. I don't know why I always take it back to dentistry. Xander Z-Rans, thanks for the super chat. Hi Adam, this is XB Gavin. This is XB Gavin, Chrissy, tell us some Adam embarrassing stories, and have you seen what type of people hit on Adam back in the day? So this is rife with spelling errors, Xander. XB Gavin.
I think this is Gavin that I used to work with me at the Babylon Bee.
Oh, snap.
He's a good friend of mine. Yeah.
Okay. Oh my God. And he's here now. I don't think I have any Adam embarrassing stories. I always knew him as an intern to be like truly an A student. Like I was jealous of you. I was like, oh, look at this fucking guy. He's getting hired. He's getting all the jobs. He's working for Ellen. Just look at him. Look at him just like A+ing life. God damn it.
I don't know that. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything embarrassing that happened back in the Conan days. We were all very close as interns. I remember like going out to the Blarney Stone all the time to hang out with the interns after work.
Yeah.
I
remember I had to like I had to go right kind of back like right away because they especially if the show went late, they're like, well, we could maybe a couple times they let me take a car back to college. They would send me back to Fairfield in a black car, and I remember telling the driver to like drive around and wait until people were around because I wanted people to see me coming out of this black car, thinking like I had this cool life. Like, oh my God, what a sad thing for me. And I'm like, to just drop me off in front of my townhouse. Wait, can you hold on? That's really cool. I don't think I went out too much because I think I had to get back to campus. Have I seen what type of people hit on Adam back in the day? No, I didn't. What type of people hit on you back in the day?
You know what's interesting? I will say this. There was no, that was after I started working at Ellen. That's when.
Oh, right.
When I would do the Kevin the Cashier bits and the Ellen segments, anytime I was on TV, the next day my like DMs on Facebook and Twitter would be filled with messages from gay men in the Philippines. So that's where
really
that was apparently the audience that as an Ellen performer I was attracting.
Did they want you to come out to the Philippines? What did they expect you to do?
I have no idea. I didn't respond to them really. There was this one guy. No, I'm kidding. You know, it's interesting because I didn't date a lot in high school and college. I went out on a few dates here and there. But what was interesting about moving to New York, since he's asking what type of people hit on you, I did feel that there was a girl that I interned with that we wound up dating for a while when I lived there. And when I moved to New York and started working for Conan, it was this feeling of when you're around those interns in that environment, it was the first place where you felt like, oh, I'm around like my people, like my social network. And I think there was, there were interns that would, date each other. And I think it's because you're kind of around these people that you connect with, that you're kind of on the same page and you have the same sort of, worldview and the same sense of humor, and you're in this, exciting kind of environment together. So I think I made a lot of really good friends, working there when we were interning together, and it was a really fun time, and it felt like a very cool group of people to be around.
Yeah, those were fun times. Matthew Hammond, what's up? We're the best improv guys, the two guys that did the Sonic commercials. Oh, TJ and Dave.
Yeah.
Dave Pasquazi, TJ Jagodowski, I think. They were, I remember at UCB, they would tell us to go see them whenever they were in town, and they would do shows at the Barrow Street Theater in New York. And holy shit, it was some of the best just theater I've ever seen. These two guys, they would do basically like a 2-man play, completely pull it out of their ass. And it was like mind blowing how good they were.
There were a lot of UCB people in Sonic. Didn't Brian Husky do them for a while? Like early on?
You mean like work with TJ and Dave, or?
I don't know if he was in the one with TJ and Dave, but he was I think he was a UCB guy that I would see at ASCAT and stuff, and then he showed up in a lot of the Sonic commercials.
He was in a lot of like movies too.
Yeah.
God, I would see. I remember before Bobby Moynihan got on to SNL, I would see him in commercials, and I remember like. Yeah. Maggie Carey used to date Bill Hader. She was a writer, I think, at SNL, or they met through UCB. And I think Bill Hader's dating Ali Wong now.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh my God. Yeah. Just so many moments of like a commercial and like being like, I know that guy. Matthew Hammond, does improv prepare for crowd work or is it a built-in talent? I think improv prepared me to have good crowd working skills. You just have to like be good at letting go of controlling the situation.
Yeah, and that's hard for me because I've never done improv. I've actually been thinking about trying to take a class just for, see how
Why
I do it,
not?
just as a way to develop a little bit. Because I know this isn't true of everybody, but I've heard, people who are good at stand-up are often not as good at improv and vice versa. Now, there are people that are good at both, but it is that aspect of like letting go. Like as a comedian, especially as somebody who's very writerly focused, it's like I want to know where it's going. And I do crowd work now, but I would say crowd work was probably the last skill that I developed as a stand-up comedian. And it is because you have to kind of be used to be comfortable letting it go and knowing that you can bring it back. And I think doing stand-up for a while to where you have this, not just a few minutes, but an hour or more of material that you can fall back on, it frees you to let go a little bit more and see where the conversation with the audience takes you. Because you're always like, well, wherever this tangent goes, I can find a way to bring it back to the set and back to the material that I'm doing. But yeah, I think improv is definitely great for crowd work.
Yeah, with improv, you have to be similar to crowd work. You have to be willing for the whole thing to bomb. You just like be present and listen and go like, this could go nowhere. Like I could, you could stand there and be like, shit, I got absolutely nothing about real estate. This guy works in real estate. His mom just died, and you're scanning your brain. You're like, I got nothing. And you're like, and you just wait, and hopefully something will come up. Or if not, then you just kind of embrace that moment too. I would say like improv and being a writer, they might be at the opposite ends of what part of your brain that you use.
Yeah. And the other thing I've heard is hard. I read Del Close's Truth in Comedy for the first time this past year because I was thinking a lot about, trying improv. And I've heard this before, but it says in the book specifically, stand-up comedians, their most difficult thing in improv is that they always want to go for a joke. Like a stand-up is you're always thinking, where do I get the next laugh? And part of improv is just building the scene and committing to the game and, trusting the other person and not necessarily going for the laugh every chance that you get.
Which is so scary for a stand-up comic.
That sounds terrifying to me.
You're like, wait, this could just never pay off and bomb in front of this paying audience. And then what? Oh, it's amazing. Like, but improv is it was such a culty scene, the UCB. Like, but I was obsessed. Oh my God. I remember I'd work whatever day job I had in the city, and then I would go take a class. It'd be like 7 to 9 p.m., like maybe once or twice a week. And then the rest of the week, I would just after work go and watch whatever show was at the UCB and just take the train back like really late at night.
Yeah.
Did that for years.
I had so many late nights in New York going to the ASCAT shows on Sunday night when all the like SNL cast members and Conan writers and Daily Show writers and correspondents, they would all show up there. And it was that free show and it'd be lined up down the street.
Yeah.
And you just see some of the, like Amy Poehler and Horatio Sands hosted it for a long time. And Brian Stack would perform there a lot. I don't know. Do they still do that show? I don't know if that's still going.
UCB went bankrupt, like the theater. Yeah. They have no more theater
They don't have any permanent theater space in New York right now.
Oh, I think
because they have one out here on Franklin in Hollywood, across from the giant celebrity Scientology Center.
Ooh, let's see. Is there a UCB theater in New York? Because I remember they used to be on like 23rd and 8th or something.
Under Gristedes Market.
Yep.
It was in the basement, and they had bags on the pipes to keep the sewage pipes.
Oh yeah, I know that basement well. I was fingered in that basement.
That's the first place I did stand up. That was where the Pete Holmes the UCB open mic was.
Oh wow, yeah. I think they are. I think there's no. Oh, there's a UCB theater in Hell's Kitchen on West 42nd Street. Really? Oh, and there's a UCB theater East, which I would occasionally do stand up there. I don't know if that's still open. It looked, the last time I walked past it, it looked very much closed down. Apparently there's one in Hell's Kitchen. All right, I'll have to like walk by that.
But those ASCAT shows, those were so amazing. They'd have the guest monologist come. I saw Chevy Chase do the monologue one time, and it just felt it was a very cool, like, underground comedy scene there.
It did. It was very cool and very, like, sort of insular. Douglas, Harvard Lampoon used to have the best writers. I remember, I met a Harvard Lampoon person, like, at a stand-up show. The guy gave me his card, and it just kind of, like, went nowhere. I was like, what? It's almost like, what can you give me that I can't give myself in terms of, like, I guess, putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Or,
And I mean,
there were no
Conan was
projects.
Conan was a Harvard Lampoon guy, and then did Simpsons and SNL, and then got his own show. And Dan Gore, the Conan writer, he was a Harvard guy. He went on to create Brooklyn Nine-Nine after that.
Oh, so many Jews. I'm now hearing all these names. I'm like, everyone's Jewish and works on all these shows. I feel like lucky that I even broke in. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just
no comment on that.
Just an observation.
Is Dan Gore Jewish? I don't even know. Conan's not Jewish.
Oh, right. Because he's ginger. There you go. But now you have a new podcast with fellow Babylon Bee writer.
Former, yeah. Ethan and I were both let go unceremoniously from the Bee. So we have our own. We're not there anymore.
How dare they? I guess.
Ethan. He was fired, I guess, back a few months after I started there, and then I took over on the Babylon Bee podcast. He went to Daily Wire and is working with them on their Chipchilla animated show, and some of their other projects. And then when I left the Bee, Ethan and I had done the Bee podcast together during the time when it overlapped. We had fun talking about the news and just riffing on especially weird news stories and stuff like that. So a few weeks ago, Ethan and I started a new podcast called The Talk Down. So you can check it out, The Talk Down on YouTube. We go through big news stories, weird news stories, catch up on what's happening in the week. You know how podcasts work, the same stuff. And then, so you can check that one out. And then I also have my own kind of conservative version of Weekend Update called The Canceled News. And that's on my YouTube channel, Adam Yenser.
Oh, I love this. Everyone subscribe. Boom.
Thank you.
Everyone subscribe to Adam's YouTube. And you have a stand-up schedule. People can see you live. Let me pull it up. Bing, bing, bing. Oh, and you did laughs as well? Wow.
Yeah, you were on that also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you do your taping at?
Ohio. I think the Funny Bone in Ohio. I remember, I think I was recently started dating my husband. And I had kind of, Hofstadter was giving out locations of which taping can you go to? And I just slept on it. And by the time I got back to it, it was like Ohio or something even farther away. And I was like, Frank was like, we're doing it. And he drove me 9 hours to Ohio so I could do this laughs taping. And I remember
it was a fun show. It was fun. It was on very late at night. I don't know what kind of numbers it did because it was on this weird.
They never told us.
Time. Yeah, I think it was on Fox opposite SNL or something. So I don't think anybody watched it. But their clips, they had a lot of good up and coming comedians on there. I had a good time at the taping. It was at Pechanga Casino here in California, where I'm going back there in August, I think, for a show.
Yeah, it was really exciting. Do you know who Pearl is? Pearly thinks she played a clip of one of my clips from Laughs, which is now like 100 years ago. What was that? 2012?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
She played one of my clips to be like, "Look, see, she's a whore," and I was like, "Oh God."
Oh man.
Great.
Laughs also became. I feel like this happens to a lot of sort of comedy platforms. Back in the day, when there was just the 3 late night shows, if you got a late night spot, your career was set. And then when there was, and then Conan was sort of the big spot for stand-up in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then we have these shows like Laughs. At first, everybody was trying to get on them. And now it's like every comedian at every open mic is like, them from Laughs on Fox. And then I think Dry Bar started doing that too, because I had a Dry Bar special. I loved it. It was such a great experience. But so many they start churning out these specials, and it's like in the future, everyone will have a Dry Bar special.
Oh yeah. Look at this. California dates up the wazoo. If you guys live in the Los Angeles area or even Texas, it'll be at TK's. You're gonna see
TK's, yeah.
Lila.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll see Lila that week. She'll probably be on some of those shows, I would imagine.
That's
And then
awesome.
I was on the road for a while. So yeah, the next month or two, I'm mostly in California. I got some up the coast in the San Luis Obispo area. And then some road shows. Got TK's in August.
And you're still out in California now, or are you back in New York?
Yeah, I still live in California. People always ask me, why are you still there? 'Cause I always say it's a
Dude,
beautiful
yeah.
state. The politics suck. It's run terribly. I don't know that it will ever change, at least not in the coming years. But there's
It
cool
is
people out
beautiful
here.
out
There's a
there.
lot to do. Yeah.
People say the same thing for why I'm still in New York. I go, look, I don't know is my answer.
Yeah.
I like having seasons. It's cool. Awesome. Everyone go see Adam. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. All the things. Listen to his new podcast. Matthew Hammond with another super chat. What are some of your favorite comedy movies? Could they not be made today, or are studios scared to make them because they are offensive? Yeah, the writers are scared. I think the studios are scared, but mostly the writers are scared. I think at this point, the studios would anything that they think could make money, they'll probably be down for because it's just been such
Yeah.
failure after failure for Hollywood. But I think the writers are scared shitless.
It's interesting you say it because I would say what I've experienced in Hollywood is there for what now I do think currently and recently there's been a lot of pushback against cancel culture. I think people are kind of I don't know if I would say it's gone, but people are kind of over it, and it's people are trying to push back against that. And Hollywood does they make South Park, they make Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle specials. If something makes money, they will. That's their bottom line. But what's interesting at the sort of height of cancel culture around 2020, 2021, when the world was going crazy, I would hear a lot of people in Hollywood that are on the left, but the reason they wouldn't want to make this stuff is they were afraid of people further to the left than they were. It's like there's not everyone in Hollywood is on board with, for instance, the men playing in female sports and all this.
Yeah, because it's like a fucking gay mafia. They don't want to
exactly
be
and DEI. So even the people that are on the left in charge, they were scared of the people who are further to the left than them. They'll say, no, I disagree, but I know what will happen to us if we say
what
this.
What a horrible way to live your life. That is like such a pussy way to live. That's why
it is. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, those people are successful because they have like good jobs, but yeah, I'm happy that I don't have to worry about that.
But then I don't know if I go as far as to say you couldn't get a movie made. Like I said, if it was strong enough, if the writing was strong enough, then they thought there was an audience for it. Money is the bottom line. But I mean, some of my favorites, my favorite of all time, are probably comedy movies. I love Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it's interesting because in the whole sort of current comedy culture debate, I feel like John Cleese has spoken out a lot against sort of sensitivity and woke culture and cancel culture. And then Eric Idle has been a little more sympathetic to it. But then I loved Anchorman.
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to think
the
what
2010s, like Bridesmaids was funny.
Bridesmaids was great.
Tropic Thunder was so funny. Did you know
Anchorman? I think Anchorman was kind of fresh when we started interning because I think that was when everybody just spoke in Anchorman quotes. That was the era of time.
Oh God! And then like
Super
Bad, and then like the Judd Apatow era of like, oh, we're seeing just the same 6 people in every movie.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
And it's not like laugh out loud funny, but I've always loved Dr. Strangelove. It's a real old one and kind of a dark, dramatic comedy, but I always loved that one.
Yeah. I remember I talk about this a lot. So I guess after Tropic Thunder, Jamie Foxx, and he really loved what the fuck's his name? Robert Downey Jr.'s role in Tropic Thunder, like when he was in blackface, and apparently they wrote, and I don't know if they shot a film, something similar where he was doing that, but like as a Mexican or like a Spanish character, like he had like Mexican face on, and he tabled it, he shelved it because he was too afraid of like getting canceled. So there's either a script or a movie shot somewhere, and I'm like, what a shame, because if anybody has the fuck you money and can be a leader in comedy and in movie production, it's someone like Jamie Foxx. I'm like, if he doesn't have the balls to put something out there, like what hope does anybody else have? So that's always bothered me. Like he should just not. So what if it bombs? It bombs. Like you got to try though.
Yeah.
Matthew Hammond, are studios looking for guaranteed cash with sequels? I would say yes, but those are not. Even those are kind of not. They've spent their goodwill on that.
I think they are, but it's a bad strategy. It's people are tired of all the remakes and reboots and sequels, and it's also a shame sometimes because some of these movies, it's like you want when they make just one good movie, it doesn't always need a sequel because I feel like sometimes that ruins it. You're just like, let that movie be.
Yeah.
Like they're making the Gladiator sequel now. I hope it's good. I'll go see it, but Gladiator was such an amazing movie. I don't know that I need more of that. It's
Yeah.
kind of, if you can't do it well, and maybe they will do a good job with it, but a lot of the reboots and sequels, it's just people are kind of tired of it. And I think they do need people want to see new content.
Oh, definitely. Uncle Pappy Wolf, as a Christian, how do you deal with keeping your comedy good and yet not cross your values, not cross a line and becoming preachy? Any tips to Christian arts?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because I do in my stand-up, I always try to work in the fact that I'm Christian. I don't make it heavy-handed where the whole thing is, me preaching to the audience. But kind of in the same way that I was talking earlier about how I strategize about working, my conservative perspective into my stand-up. I always start off with apolitical jokes that are just observational or will get the whole audience on board, kind of establish that you're funny and get them laughing. And then I never really beat people over the head with my Christian faith, but I say that I'm a Lutheran. I say, what my beliefs are, and I kind of have it worked into some of the jokes. I travel a lot, so I have a joke about traveling to different national parks, and I mentioned, they showcase the beauty of nature that God created for us, and I have kind of a joke about that. So I'm not beating them over the head with the message, but my faith is important, and I work that in. And it's one of the reasons I liked working at the Babylon Bee, because it is a Christian platform, and so I think it's important to kind of have that perspective out there. It's one of the things hard about working in Hollywood is I never felt like I experienced, like being silenced or being canceled. I do think canceling happens to people. I didn't experience it, but I did experience you couldn't get the conservative perspective on the air. If you were writing apolitical jokes, they'd say, "Oh, you're great. You can write for Ellen." And like I freelanced for Weekend Update for several years under Seth Meyers and then Colin Jost and Michael Che. And it's like, as long as you're writing, jokes, and I get that it's their voice, so it has to be for them. But even in kind of pitching projects of my own or doing my own bits, you can't do it from a right-leaning perspective, on a lot of those shows. Yeah.
That's fascinating. They just won't allow it. They just have you tried? And
there was one. So the one experience. Now I don't go as hard against SNL as some people do, because I think if you watch Colin Jost and Michael Che, they are very funny. I know a lot of people on the right like to say, SNL has gone woke. I think if you watch it I didn't like the whole years where they were doing the Alec Baldwin openings every day as Trump. I thought those were heavy-handed, but I think there's a lot of good stuff on Weekend Update still, and they do go after both sides, and SNL still has some strong sketches even in their kind of off years. But where I experienced it, like one example that always comes to mind, when I was at Ellen, when the Robert Mueller report came out that found Trump didn't collude with Russia, leading up to that, there was all these people, that thought Trump was going to be indicted and that they were going to prove he colluded with Russia and he stole the election and all this stuff. And one of our producers, he would tweet out every day, it's indictment eve. Trump's going to get, Robert Mueller has the goods. And the day that came out, it was one of the biggest stories in the news. And I wrote this monologue where Ellen was trying to recap everything that happened in the news. And it was like, I think the Game of Thrones finale or something was happening around the same time. And there was the Mueller report. And it was her kind of getting all these storylines mixed up in her head. And so that was the bit. And in it, I quoted a passage from the Mueller report. I didn't want to editorialize. I wasn't trying to put my own spin on it. But as a setup for a joke, I put in the Mueller report came out and he found Trump did not collaborate or coordinate with Russia. That was the direct quote. It was in all the headlines. And we're reading it in the producers meeting, and our executive producer goes, I don't know if we want to say that Trump didn't collaborate or collude with Russia. And I go, Ed, that's the word from the Mueller report. And he goes, yeah, but I don't know if I want to say it. And I go, why can't I say that? He goes, because I don't want you to. So it's like,
And this was on Ellen?
that was Ed, one of the
Wow.
producers there. Yeah, but he, there was this thing where I had to rewrite part of the monologue then, but it pissed me off because I almost lost the whole monologue. And in that case, I wasn't even editorializing. It was just the Mueller
That's
report.
facts.
The Mueller report didn't find what they wanted it to find,
Yeah.
and they couldn't handle it. It's and
Oof.
so yeah.
TDS. Yeah.
But yeah, but like as far as a Christian artist, I would recommend stay true to your values. Try to work it in a way that's not heavy-handed. Make sure you're winning the audience over, but then also communicating your faith and finding whatever art you're doing. If it's drama, if it's comedy, if it's music. I've always said when it comes to Christian music, a lot of times it's not that there aren't any good Christian groups or rock bands out there, but a lot of times it comes across as this sort of like pandering, co-opted kind of thing. Whereas there are mainstream musicians, like Johnny Cash is a great example, who was this rock and country star, but then he was a Christian. He worked that into some of his songs and his performances, and I think that's an important thing to do.
Yeah. Junior asks, did Adam C. Ellen have one of her insane outbursts?
I never saw her have an insane outburst. It was a tough place to work. She could be tough at times, but like I said, I got along with her. I enjoyed working there. One of the things I think was very weird about
picturing her eating your lunch for no reason. Like when you say tough place to work, I just imagine like she's eating your food out of the fridge.
She wouldn't. No, she would not eat anyone else's food out of the fridge. What I thought was, I will say this, what I thought was weird about the whole Ellen is toxic and the whole kind of effort to take her down, it wasn't something new. I had heard that Ellen was tough to work for 12 years ago before I started working there. Everybody in Hollywood had heard this rumor that it was a tough place to work. It seemed like, that what happened was there was that whole Me Too moment where people were trying to tear down, as many celebrities for all different things that they could. And there was this moment where Ellen took a picture with George W. Bush at a Dallas Cowboys game. They were sitting in the stands together. And a lot of people on social media said, "Oh, you're sitting with a war criminal. How can you do this?" And they had me and one of the most left-leaning writers on staff write this monologue for Ellen because she wanted to send this message out there. She said, "I don't agree with George W. Bush on everything. There's a lot he did that I disagree with, but I think we should be able to talk to people on the other side, that we should be able to have these conversations." And that's also how she always treated me. She knew I was conservative. She was very, I don't agree with him on everything, but he's a good writer. I'm glad to have him here. And I always appreciated that. But even after she did that monologue, the left started going after her even harder. And I mean, the social media outrage people on the left.
It's exactly what you said. Like they're afraid of somebody who's more left than them.
And then there was also a thing where Kevin Hart got canceled from the Oscars because he had made gay jokes years ago. And Ellen had him on and said, I know you said that back then, but I don't think that should be, held against you. People make mistakes, or people said things in the past. And then there was this kind of shift in attitude towards her. So these rumors that she was difficult and that she was tough and that was a hard place to work, they had been around there forever. But the media didn't seem to care when they saw her as the face of, kind of a left-leaning movement. And she is, right. I think, still, I don't know all her politics. I think she is on the left, obviously, on a lot of social issues, especially. But it seemed like it's when they got mad at her, then it was like, all right, now let's bring to the surface all these rumors that have been around for years about her being
right.
mean or her being tough to people. Yeah.
And not you personally, but I guess you kind of touched on it, like, oh, she's mean. Like, what reasons did other people?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Of course. Like, what would other people say are the reasons for her being tough to work with? Not you, of course, because you had.
What would other people say? It's a demanding environment to work on. I think there was a producer there that was very difficult to work for, but he was also the one that was doing the job of the executive producer. It's hard because some of these people can be dicks at times, but you sometimes need someone who's a dick in charge, and that doesn't mean it's okay for them to do, inappropriate stuff or anything like that. But, I don't know. I think there's just that these people, their faces on the show. and there's a lot of pressure on them also. And they're real people. They have good days, they have bad days. They've gone through things in their own life. And yeah, there was days when it was tough, and there was days when it was, the best place in the world to work. It was a lot of fun. And there's also this thing now, they did this with other talk show hosts too. There just a few months ago, they said about Jimmy Fallon that he's, there was a toxic workplace article. And I think it's the same. And I think it's the same reporter. There's this girl that she was at BuzzFeed, and I think now she's at Rolling Stone. And her whole purpose in life is to investigate which people are toxic to work for and then tear them down in the media. But, people going into this industry, they're celebrities. They have their issues. Some of them are difficult people. Some of them are divas. So I think we got spoiled starting at Conan, because Conan and his staff are just, it's one of the best places I've ever worked. They're all
everyone
very
was
cool
so
people.
sweet. It was just like, oh, get Conan's yogurt, make sure his gum is stocked.
But even like a show like SNL, I've heard that it's not toxic, but it's a grueling pace at that show. It wears people down. It takes a toll on people. And, when you're going into this environment, they're high stress, high pressure kind of jobs, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Like, every boss is a dick. I mean, like,
that's
I've never had a boss that was just chill and easygoing. I've hated every single one of them. So
I've said that before too, because it's like, even if you work, a fast food job or an office job, think about your boss. There's probably, you've had good bosses, you've had bad bosses.
Oh, yeah.
Even the bosses that you get along with, some days it's like, oh, they were a dick to me today.
They're
the boss. They're in charge.
My last day job boss was in the hospital for 6 weeks. He had like a crazy foot infection, and like he must have been on some sort of like whatever drug. But he handed me his fucking bedpan to empty out when I was like visiting him in the hospital, and I did it because I was so afraid of losing my job.
It's interesting you say that, because Ellen would do that at the end of all of our writers' meetings. one of us had to carry her bedpan away.
Oh my God. It is what it is. Uncle Happy Wolf, as comedians, do you feel a struggle between wanting to bring different audiences together, yet pushing back against the pressure of not being woke to make money? No, I don't feel any pressure to be woke to make money, because I've already so firmly like dug a hole for myself in terms of being like an alt-right person. Like, I've never been mainstream, and I sort of like gained popularity and following from kind of just being myself and not being part of something else. I would say, yeah, you do feel pressure to like, okay, that your money is kind of related to your following and how many tickets you can sell.
I think, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I think in terms of money, it is a risk. You're always worried, will there be opportunities for me if I say the things that I believe, or if somebody does decide they don't like me, is it gonna deny an opportunity to make a living and have, we're artists and we make our income doing this. So I think that pressure is there. As far as the struggle between wanting to bring the two different audiences together, what I always come back to is that's why I love stand-up comedy, especially when you're going to the comedy clubs in, like LA and New York have great clubs. When you go to, the middle of the country, one of the things I love is cities are generally, if you go to the Midwest, they're often left-leaning cities, but in very red states.
Right.
And so
like Dallas.
And so the audience is very mixed. And I've always said the most fun audiences to perform for is when there's some liberals, some conservatives, some old people, some young people. The worst audiences that I perform for are when it's either all conservative people or all liberal people.
Or all young people.
Because they all have the same mindset. And there's a great book about comedy called The Humor Code, where they kind of try to come up with like what's the philosophy that defines what comedy is. And they come up with this idea of the benign violation theory, where what makes something funny is if it violates an expectation or a rule, but in a way that's not harmful. And so when you have a mixture of people with different political beliefs, different backgrounds, there's a lot of different rules and expectations and taboos that you can play with. And I think something that makes comedy, when it's all for one side, this would go for somebody like Stephen Colbert on the left, Steven Crowder on the right, or me as a comedian if I'm performing for an all right-leaning crowd or an all left-leaning crowd. When everyone's on the same side, there's not a lot of rules that you can violate. Like if you go up in front of a
Yeah.
left-leaning crowd and call Trump racist, you're not violating
It's
anyone's
clapter.
expectation. If
They'll
you go up in
clap
front
for
of
that,
if you go up in front of a right-leaning crowd and just say, trans women are men, it's true, but it's not. You're not violating expectation. You're not. There's no nuance. There's no innuendo. There's no creative, clever take on it. And so, as far as bringing the two audiences together, I like going to those places where those two audiences are together in the same room, because then you have to walk that line.
Try to poke holes in both sides.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be really funny to argue for the other side.
I have that instinct. Do you have this instinct as a comedian? So I'm known as, I don't brand myself super politically all the time, but I'm very openly conservative. Whenever I go out to like a comedy club, if I know it's in LA or New York where the audience is liberal, I love getting them to laugh and then leaning into my conservatism and seeing how far I can walk that line. When I do all conservative rooms, I always think like, I don't know if it's, sometimes I just start off by shitting on QAnon. I always want to do something to piss off that audience. It's like, you always want to keep them on their toes. You always want to alienate them just a little bit, because walking that line, I think, is where some of the best comedy is.
I like doing that, but then sometimes I go, oh, am I going to be physically attacked by a 300-pound woman in the audience? Like,
you got a bottle or something thrown at you, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've had sandwiches thrown at us.
Oh, man.
Not shoes. That would be funny. K-Max says, woke actually bring in money. I see no evidence it brings in revenue. Most shows and movies fail when they try to go woke. I've yet to see an overt woke message do well. It's kind of like the systems in place allow for. What is that? Is it the? Oh, is that a lawnmower?
Oh, do you hear? I'm surprised you can hear that. Yeah, it's out. It's far away. I don't even hear it much here.
Okay. I thought it was like, when Christians get sucked up into the sky.
I'm getting raptured.
Yeah, I thought you were getting raptured. I'm like, oh, just wait till the end.
Yeah.
I think the systems that are the mainstream systems that are in place lends themselves to being taken hostage by the woke. And again, because they're people that work in them are like regular lefties to extreme lefties. So, but like, products themselves, no. Don't do
that. I haven't seen the woke. I'm actually surprised the woke sort of messaging and agenda is still so strong a force in Hollywood and the media, because it seems like all along it was more a fear of losing money than a big incentive of making money. It seems like they're afraid if they don't play that game, they'll get boycotted or they'll have some backlash against them. I don't really see that the woke themed movies and the woke reboots are becoming huge money makers. And it seems in some franchises, it's alienating half the audience when you do that.
It's a fear. I think it's mostly fear.
Yeah.
I think studios, writers, everyone's got to be like, yeah, no, making a good product is more important than losing an advertiser, getting a bad article written about you online. I think everyone's got to decide together that putting out a good, funny product is more important than all of that.
Yeah.
Philip Vecchio, rank levels of gayness, Ellen, TSA, CIA. Interesting. Oh, God, I wouldn't know. Adam.
Oh, I would say, I think you have it in the right order there. I think it's Ellen and then TSA and then CIA.
True. I got very much felt up. Like I was 7 months pregnant. There's a picture of me. Like TSA's lady's got a hand. Like she's basically knew how much dilated I was. It was good times. Good times, guys. I love this. Adam, thank you so much for coming on.
This was so much fun to catch up. Yeah.
So much fun. My God.
Let's not wait 20 years to do it again.
Yeah. Jesus.
And we got to do some stand-up shows together when we're on the same coast or in the same cities. Yeah.
That would be so fun. Everyone follow Adam. Check him out in California or Texas, wherever he's at. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. And your new podcast is called what?
The Talk Down with Ethan Nicole and Adam Yenser.
Yes, get down with the talk down. Thank you to the chat. Love you guys, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.